Jake Morrison felt the ship shake under his feet as he stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon. The numbers on his screen made no sense at all. Something was happening on Earth, and it was big. Very big. The energy readings were unlike anything he had ever seen in his 20 years of space service. His hands moved quickly over the controls as he tried to understand what the sensors were telling him. Down on Earth, in the hot sand of the Sahara Desert, Dr. Lisa Barnes was digging in the ruins when the ground started to shake. She had been working at this site for 3 months now. The stones were old, older than anything humans had ever built. The writing on the walls was strange too. It seemed to move when she looked at it. The words talked about something called the Keeper of the Small Blue World. Lisa did not understand what it meant, but she knew it was important. The shaking got stronger and stronger. Lisa's team ran away from the dig site, but she stayed. She had to see what was happening. The ancient stones began to glow with a soft blue light. The air around her felt thick and electric. Something was waking up deep under the ground. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time, far away in space near another star. An alien commander named Kethfer felt the disturbance too. His people called themselves the Zephyrians, and they had ruled this part of space for 3,000 years. They were strong, and their ships were fast. But the old books in their libraries spoke of something that once made even the star gods afraid. Kethfer looked at the readings on his ship's sensors, and his blood went cold. The energy was coming from the third planet in the Sol system. The planet the humans called Earth. Captain Ryan Douglas was flying his patrol ship near Jupiter when the emergency message came through. His radio crackled with static before the voice of Earth Command came through, clear and urgent. The message was short, but it made Ryan's heart race. All human ships were to return home right away. Something had awakened on Earth, and humanity was no longer alone in the way they thought they were. Back on the USS Horizon, Jake tried to call Earth Command, but the signals were being blocked by something. The energy readings from Earth were getting stronger every minute. His science officer, a young woman named Carol Smith, ran up to him with a worried look on her face. She told him that every instrument on the ship was detecting the same thing. Something massive was rising from deep inside the Earth. It was bigger than a city and older than human civilization in the Sahara. Lisa watched as the ground split open around the ancient ruins. A structure made of crystal and metal began to rise from the sand. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The crystal parts glowed with inner light, and the metal seemed to flow like water. Strange symbols appeared on its surface. Symbols that hurt to look at for too long. Lisa knew she was seeing something that was never meant for human eyes. The alien fleets throughout the galaxy began to panic as the readings reached them. The Vorthok Empire had been planning to take Earth's resources for themselves. They had powerful ships and deadly weapons. But now their war council was meeting in emergency session. The energy signature from Earth matched something in their oldest records. Something that had once ruled the galaxy before their empire was even born. On Earth, every government was getting the same reports. Seismic stations around the world were detecting movement deep in the planet's core. The movement was not random like an earthquake. It was organized and purposeful. Something intelligent was moving down there. Military satellites were taking pictures of strange lights appearing all over the planet. The lights formed patterns that seemed to have meaning. Dr. Lisa Barnes touched the crystal wall of the rising structure, and suddenly her mind was filled with images. She saw the Earth as it was millions of years ago. She saw great cities that floated in the sky, and ships that could travel between stars in the blink of an eye. She saw beings that looked almost human, but were so much more. They had power over matter and energy itself. They were the ones who had built this place. They were the ones who had been sleeping beneath the Earth all this time. Jake Morrison received new orders from Earth Command. He was to take his ship to Earth immediately and report to the new command center that was being built around the crystal. Structure in the Sahara? The structure was now fully risen from the ground, and it was huge. It stretched up into the sky like a mountain made of light. Every human ship in space was being called home. Something was about to happen, and humanity needed to be ready. The Guardian had awakened after sleeping for millions of years. It had been waiting for the right time to reveal itself to its children. The humans who lived on Earth were not just another species that had evolved on a random planet. They were the descendants of the beings who had once shaped the galaxy itself. The Guardian had been watching over them, keeping them safe, helping them grow. Now, the time had come for them to remember who they really were. As Jake's ship turned toward Earth, he could see the glow of the Guardian's crystal structure, even from space. The light was getting brighter and stronger. Soon every human being, on Earth and in space, would feel its presence. They would begin to understand that their quiet little planet had been hiding the greatest secret in the galaxy. The children of the Star Builders were about to wake up, and the universe would never be the same again. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked through the deep tunnels beneath the mountain. The emergency meeting had been called by the president himself. World leaders from every major nation were gathering in the most secure place on Earth. The files they were about to see had been locked away for 50 years. Now the Guardian's awakening had forced them to reveal the truth about humanity's real history. Dr. Alex Turner carried the heavy case of classified documents into the meeting room. He had spent his whole career studying strange artifacts that did not fit with normal human history. Pieces of technology that were too advanced, ruins that were too old, genetic markers in human DNA that made no sense. Now he finally had permission to tell the world leaders what he had discovered. Humanity was not from Earth. The meeting room fell silent as Alex opened the first file. The pictures showed artifacts found all over the world. Metal that could not be scratched by any known tool. Crystals that generated their own power. Stones with writing that seemed to change depending on who was reading it. Every piece had been found in places where no human civilization should have existed. Some were buried under ice that was millions of years old. Kate listened as Alex explained the evidence. The human genetic code contained sequences that did not match any other life form on Earth. These sequences were inactive in most people, but they were there in every single human being. They were like a locked door waiting for the right key. The Guardian's awakening was that key. It was sending signals that were turning on parts of human DNA that had been sleeping for ages. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster received reports from military bases around the world. Strange things were happening everywhere the Guardian's light could reach. Soldiers were reporting that they could see in perfect darkness. Pilots were saying they could feel their aircraft systems as if the machines were part of their own bodies. Computer technicians found that complex systems were responding to their thoughts before they even touched the controls. The Guardian structure in the Sahara was growing larger every hour. It was not building itself up from the ground. Instead, it was unfolding like a flower made of crystal and metal. Each new layer that appeared was more complex than the last. Symbols and patterns covered every surface. Some of the symbols seemed familiar to human observers, but they could not say why. It was as if the knowledge was buried deep in their minds, waiting to be remembered. General Matt Harrison watched the satellite feeds with growing amazement. The Guardian was not just affecting humans. Every piece of technology on Earth was changing too. Computers were running faster and smoother than ever before. Power plants were producing more energy with less fuel. Even simple machines like cars and phones were working better than they should. It was as if the Guardian was upgrading everything. It touched, reports came in from space stations and moon bases. The humans working there were experiencing the same strange improvements in their abilities. But something else was happening too. They were beginning to receive messages from alien races. The messages all said the same thing. The ancient rulers had returned, and the galaxy must prepare to welcome them home. Dr. Alex Turner showed the world leaders the most secret file of all. It contained communications that had been intercepted from alien sources over the past 30 years. The aliens had been watching Earth and waiting. They knew something that humanity had forgotten. They knew that the people of Earth were the children of the beings who had once ruled the entire galaxy, the beings who had created most of the alien races themselves. The truth was almost too big to understand. Millions of years ago, an advanced race had spread across the galaxy. They had built great cities on countless worlds. They had created new forms of life and taught them how to build their own civilizations. They had power over space and time itself. But something had gone wrong. A great war had torn the galaxy apart. In the end, the advanced race had chosen to leave everything behind and hide on one small blue planet. Amy Foster coordinated with bases around the world. As more strange reports came in, children were displaying abilities that should not exist. A 6-year-old girl in Tokyo had moved objects with her mind. Twin boys in London were speaking to each other without words, even when they were in different rooms. A teenager in New York had somehow fixed a broken computer just by touching it. The changes were happening faster now. The Guardians sent out a pulse of energy that reached every human mind on Earth at the same time. For just a moment, everyone saw the same vision. They saw the Earth as it had been long ago. They saw great ships landing from the stars carrying refugees from a dying civilization. They saw the survivors using their technology to hide their presence and make themselves appear to be primitive humans. They saw the Guardian being built to watch over them and their children until the day came when it would be safe to remember. Kate Sullivan realized that the emergency meeting was no longer about preparing for an alien invasion. It was about preparing humanity to take its place as the rulers of the galaxy once again. The alien races were not coming to conquer Earth. They were coming to submit to the descendants of their creators. The responsibility was overwhelming. How could humanity govern a galaxy when they had trouble governing their own planet? The Guardians? Message continued to flow into human minds around the world. It showed them images of the ancient civilization at its height, cities that floated among the clouds, ships that could cross between different dimensions, beings who could reshape matter with their thoughts and heal any injury with their touch. This was humanity's true heritage. This was what they had been before they chose exile and forgetfulness. Alex Turner closed the files as the world leaders sat in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. Earth was not their home world. It was their hiding place. The human race was not young and primitive. They were the descendants of the oldest and most powerful civilization the galaxy had ever known. The Guardian had awakened because the time of hiding was over. The children of the Star Builders were ready to reclaim their birthright. As the meeting ended, Kate Sullivan looked up at the ceiling, knowing that far above them the Guardian's light was growing stronger. Soon every human on Earth would begin to change. They would remember abilities their ancestors had possessed. They would understand technology that currently seemed like magic. The question was whether humanity was wise enough to use this power better than their ancestors had. The fate of the galaxy might depend on the answer. Colonel Ben Adams stood in the command center as every screen around him began to show the same message. The Guardian was speaking to all of humanity at once. Its voice came through every radio, every television, every computer on Earth. The voice was neither male nor female, but it carried the weight of millions of years. It spoke in words that every human could understand, no matter what language they normally used. Children of the blood, the Guardian said, the time of hiding ends. You have forgotten what you are, but the galaxy remembers. Prepare. Dr. Sarah Walsh had been studying strange energy readings for her entire career. Every unexplained event, every UFO sighting, every ghost story had been connected to these same energy patterns. Now she understood that it had all been the Guardian's influence. It had been gently guiding humanity, keeping their true nature hidden until they were ready to face the truth. The question that terrified her was whether humanity was actually ready, or if the Guardian had simply run out of time. The changes in humans were happening faster now. Commander Nick Taylor received reports from the space colonies that made no sense at all. The small research station on Mars had suddenly developed technology that should have taken centuries to invent. The miners on the asteroids were moving through space without their protective suits and somehow surviving. The deep space explorers were traveling faster than light, using methods that no human scientist could explain. Each human settlement beyond Earth was experiencing the same impossible breakthrough. People were discovering they could manipulate matter with their thoughts. They could communicate across vast distances without any technology at all. Some could even bend space around themselves to travel instantly from one place to another. The abilities seemed to awaken randomly in different people, but once awakened, they grew stronger by the hour. Agent Claire Mitchell had been working undercover in the alien trade stations for 5 years. She had always wondered why the aliens treated her with such strange respect. Now she knew. The moment the Guardian fully awakened, every alien in the station had fallen to their knees. Ancient treaties that had been forgotten for thousands of years were being pulled from old archives. The aliens were preparing to surrender their authority to the returning children of their creators. The Guardian began to share more of the true history with humanity. Images flowed into human minds, showing the golden age of their ancestors. The architects of reality had been able to reshape the fundamental forces of the universe. They had created stars and planets as easily as humans, built houses. They had designed new forms of life and given them intelligence and culture. The galaxy had been their garden, and every living thing in it had been their children. Ben Adams watched as the military forces of Earth began to change, without any orders being given. Soldiers were instinctively working together in ways that should have required years of training. Pilots were flying aircraft that responded to their thoughts rather than their hands. Naval crews were operating ships that had somehow upgraded themselves overnight. The Guardian was not just awakening human abilities. It was awakening human knowledge that had been passed down in their genetic code. The first alien ships began to arrive at the edge of the solar system. They came not as invaders, but as pilgrims returning to a holy site. The crews of these ships were descendants of races that the architects had created long ago. They had been waiting for thousands of years for their creators to return. Some had built entire civilizations around the hope that this day would come. Others had maintained shrines and temples dedicated to the memory of the star builders. Sarah Walsh studied the quantum readings as the Guardian revealed more of its purpose. It had not been built just to watch over humanity during their exile. It had been designed to prepare them for the return of their ancient enemy. The war that had driven the architects into hiding had never truly ended. The enemy had been waiting in the void between galaxies, growing stronger, preparing for the day when the seals would weaken and they could return to finish what they had started. Nick Taylor commanded the first human ship to be fully upgraded by the Guardian's technology. The USS Defiance could now cross the galaxy in hours rather than years. Its weapons could destroy planets or create new ones depending on the crew's intentions. But the most amazing change was in the crew themselves. They no longer thought of themselves as separate individuals. Their minds were beginning to connect in ways that allowed them to operate the ship as if it were an extension of their own bodies. The Guardian showed humanity the ruins of their original homeworld. The planet had been beautiful once, covered in cities that touched the clouds and oceans that sparkled with artificial stars. But the war had torn it apart. The surface was now a wasteland of broken crystal and twisted metal. The survivors had taken everything they could carry and fled to the small blue world at the edge of the galaxy, where they could hide and heal and hope. Their children would be wiser. Claire Mitchell transmitted the final intelligence report from the alien trade station. Every major civilization in the galaxy was mobilizing their fleets, but not for war. They were coming to pledge loyalty to the returned architects. Some aliens were excited about the chance to see their creators again. Others were terrified of being judged and found wanting. All of them understood that the age of independent alien civilizations was ending, and the age of unified galactic government was about to begin. The children of Earth were changing in ways that went beyond the physical. Their minds were expanding to perceive dimensions that had no names in any human language. They could see the connections between all living things. They could feel the flow of energy that moved through space and time. Some humans embraced these changes eagerly, while others fought against them, afraid of losing their original identity. Ben Adams received the final briefing from the Guardian, as it prepared for the next phase of humanity's awakening. The approaching alien fleets were not the only thing coming toward Earth. Something else was stirring in the darkness between galaxies. The ancient enemy had sensed the Guardian's awakening, and they were beginning to move. The war that had ended with exile and hiding was about to begin again, but this time humanity would be ready. The Guardian's message to humanity was clear. They were no longer the scared refugees who had fled the destruction of their homeworld. They were no longer the primitive beings who had forgotten their true nature. They were the children of the architects, inheritors of the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. The stars no longer dimmed in fear of what they might become. Now they dimmed in anticipation of what they were destined to be. The age of hiding was over, and the age of responsibility had begun. President Dale Rogers stood before the massive crystal structure that had risen from the Sahara Desert. The Guardian had chosen him to be its primary voice to humanity. His mind was now filled with knowledge that spanned millions of years. He could see the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy. He could understand technologies that turned matter into energy and back again. But with this knowledge came a terrible weight of responsibility that made him question whether humanity was ready for what was coming. The world's population watched as their president spoke words that were not entirely his own. The Guardian was using him to explain humanity's true inheritance. Earth was not just their home. It was the center of an empire that had once stretched across half the galaxy. The humans living there were the direct descendants of beings who had created most of the intelligent life in known space. They were about to inherit the authority to rule over thousands of alien civilizations. Dr. Kevin Ross had been chosen by the Guardian to serve as its chief interpreter. His job was to help other humans understand the flood of information that was being released into their minds. The process was overwhelming for most people. Children seemed to adapt more easily than adults. They accepted their new abilities as if they had always had them. Adults struggled with the changes, trying to hold on to their old understanding of reality even as that reality was being completely rewritten. The abilities awakening in humanity were becoming stronger every day. Captain Lisa Miller commanded the first ship to be fully upgraded with Guardian technology. The USS Defiance was no longer just a spacecraft. It was a living extension of its crew's collective will. The ship could phase through solid matter when they needed to avoid obstacles. It could manipulate time to arrive at its destination before it had finished leaving its starting point. Most amazingly, it could repair and improve itself based on what its crew needed. Lisa and her crew were changing too. Their consciousness was expanding beyond the limits of individual minds. They could feel each other's thoughts and emotions as clearly as their own. When one crew member learned something new, the knowledge instantly became available to all of them. They were becoming something more than human, while still remaining fundamentally themselves. The Guardian had designed the process to preserve their humanity while enhancing their capabilities. The first alien ambassadors arrived at Earth in ships that had been traveling for decades to reach this moment. Elder Seth Williams of the Galactic Council had been born on a world created by the architects millions of years ago. His people had been designed to be caretakers of their section of the galaxy until the day their creators returned. That day had finally come, and Seth felt both joy and terror at meeting the children of the gods. His people had worshipped for so long. The meeting between humans and their alien creations was unlike anything in recorded history. The aliens did not come as equals, seeking to establish diplomatic relations. They came as children returning to their parents after a long absence. Some of the alien races had grown and changed during the eons of separation. Others had carefully preserved the exact culture and technology they had been given by the architects. All of them were eager to prove they had been worthy guardians of their worlds. Major Paula Jackson led the first human expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy, where the Guardian had detected other fragments of the original architect civilization. The journey that should have taken millions of years was completed in hours, using technology that folded space like paper. What they found there were humans who had taken a different path during the Great Exile. Some had chosen to become beings of pure energy. Others had merged their consciousness with vast machine intelligences. These distant cousins of humanity had been watching Earth for eons, waiting for the Guardian to awaken. They had preserved different aspects of architect knowledge and technology. The energy beings had mastered the ability to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The machine intelligences had learned to create matter from thought alone. Each group had something to teach the awakening humans of Earth about their true potential. Kevin Ross struggled to help normal humans understand what they were becoming. The hardest part was explaining that they were not turning into something alien. They were returning to what humanity had always been meant to be. The simple farmers and factory workers of Earth carried the same genetic heritage as the godlike architects who had shaped galaxies. The Guardian was simply unlocking abilities that had been hidden in their DNA since birth. Children around the world were adapting to their new abilities with remarkable ease. A young girl in Brazil could make flowers grow by singing to them. Twin boys in Canada discovered they could share dreams and memories as easily as sharing toys. A teenager in Japan found that he could understand and repair any machine just by touching it. The children seemed to instinctively know how to use powers that terrified their parents, the Guardian revealed. More about the ancient war that had driven humanity into exile. Their enemy had not been another biological race, but something far worse. The Devourers existed in the spaces between realities, feeding on the life force of entire civilizations. They had no physical form that could be destroyed, and no single consciousness that could be reasoned with. They were hunger-given, intelligence and purpose. The architects had fought them to a standstill but could not destroy them completely. Lisa Miller and her crew took the USS Defiance on reconnaissance missions to the edges of known space. They were looking for signs that the Devourers were beginning to stir again. The Guardian had detected disturbances in the fabric of space-time that suggested their ancient enemy was preparing to return. The awakening of humanity had been triggered not by a predetermined schedule, but by the approaching threat that only the architects' descendants could face. Dale Rogers found that his enhanced consciousness allowed him to perceive the true scope of what humanity was inheriting. It was not just authority over the galaxy's alien civilizations. It was responsibility for protecting all life from a threat that existed beyond normal space and time. The Devourers had been contained, but not destroyed. They had been waiting in their dimensional prison for the seals to weaken, and for their chance to resume their endless feeding. The alien races that had come to pledge loyalty to humanity brought with them resources and knowledge that had been accumulating for thousands of years. Entire fleets of starships were placed under human command. Worlds rich in exotic matter and energy were offered as tribute. Technologies that could reshape reality itself were freely shared. But the greatest gift was the aliens' unwavering faith that the children of the architects would prove worthy of the power they were inheriting. Paula Jackson returned from Andromeda with representatives of humanity's cousin races. They brought warnings about the Devourers and offers of alliance in the coming war. They also brought hope. The scattered fragments of the architect civilization had each developed different strengths during their exile. Combined together, they might be able to accomplish what their ancestors could not. They might be able to not just contain the Devourers, but destroy them completely and end the threat forever. The Guardian prepared humanity for the final stage of their awakening. Soon they would have to make the same choice their ancestors had faced millions of years ago. They could use their power to rule the galaxy as benevolent gods, keeping all other races as eternal children under their protection. Or they could teach the aliens to develop their own potential and create a truly equal galactic civilization. The choice would determine not just the future of the galaxy, but the nature of humanity itself. Secretary of State Alan Cooper stood in the great assembly hall that had been built around the Guardian's crystal structure. Representatives from 10,000 different alien species filled the vast space. They had come from every corner of the galaxy to witness the return of the architect's children. Some were descendants of races created directly by humanity's ancestors. Others were species that had evolved naturally, but had been guided and protected by architect technology for millions of years. The ceremony was unlike anything in galactic history. It was not a conquest or a surrender, but a homecoming. The alien representatives had brought gifts and tributes that represented the accumulated wealth and knowledge of entire civilizations, crystals that contained the memories of 1 billion years, machines that could create new stars, art and music that captured the beauty of worlds beyond human imagination. All of it was offered freely to the children of those who had made it all possible. Dr. Emma White led the first full expedition to the ruins of the original architect homeworld. The journey took her team through dimensions that existed between normal space and time. What they found when they arrived was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The planet was indeed a wasteland, but it was not dead. Deep beneath the shattered surface, automated systems were still working to slowly heal the damage from the ancient war. The ruins told the story of the architects' final days on their homeworld. They had known the Devourers could not be permanently destroyed with the technology available to them. They had made the incredibly difficult decision to abandon everything they had built rather than risk the complete destruction of all life in the galaxy. The Guardian showed Emma visions of the last architect ships leaving their dying world, carrying refugees who would become the ancestors of modern humanity. Admiral Steve Johnson commanded the new galactic defense fleet that was being assembled from ships donated by alien civilizations. Each vessel was being upgraded with Guardian technology that made it more powerful than entire fleets from the old era. But the most important change was in the crews themselves. Humans and aliens were learning to work together with a level of cooperation that had never been achieved before. The Guardian revealed that the Devourers were not just moving again. They were actively testing the barriers that had contained them for so long. Reality itself was showing stress fractures in the deep regions of space where the prison seals were anchored. The ancient enemy was using new methods to weaken their bonds, having learned from their previous defeat. Humanity would need to be stronger and wiser than their ancestors if they hoped to succeed where the original architects had failed. Children around Earth continued to develop abilities that amazed even the Guardian. They were not just recovering the powers of their ancestors. They were evolving beyond what the original architects had achieved. The combination of genetic heritage and the wisdom gained through millennia of struggle was creating something new. These children would be the first generation of true new architects. Beings who combined godlike power with the compassion and understanding that came from growing up as mortal humans. Emma White discovered something incredible in the deepest ruins of the architect homeworld. Hidden beneath layers of devastation was a chamber that contained the preserved consciousness of the last architect council. They had chosen to remain behind, not to die with their world, but to wait for the day when their children would return. The council members had been sleeping for millions of years, dreaming of the future and preparing guidance for the challenges ahead. The awakened Architect Council brought knowledge that even the Guardian did not possess. They had spent their long sleep studying the nature of the Devourers and developing new strategies to fight them. They revealed that the ancient enemy was not just one type of being but an entire ecosystem of entities that fed on different aspects of reality. Defeating them would require an understanding of forces that existed beyond the normal dimensions of space and time. Alan Cooper worked with alien diplomats to establish the new galactic government. It would not be an empire ruled by humans from Earth. Instead, it would be a confederation of equals, with humanity serving as guides and protectors, rather than masters. The aliens would retain control of their own worlds and civilizations, while working together for mutual defense against threats that no single species could face alone. The Guardian began the final phase of humanity's transformation. Adults, who had struggled with their changing abilities, found that the process became easier as they learned to trust their new nature. The key was not to fight the changes but to embrace them while holding on to the values and experiences that made them human. They were becoming something greater than their ancestors had been because they understood the importance of choice and free will. Lisa Miller took the USS Defiance on the first mission into the dimensional spaces where the Devourers were imprisoned. What she found there was terrifying beyond description. The ancient enemy had indeed grown stronger during their confinement. They had learned to manipulate the prison itself, using its energy to fuel their own development. The barriers that had held them for millions of years were beginning to crack under the pressure of their expanding power. The new architects were ready for the Axis challenge their ancestors could not meet. They had power that could reshape reality itself, but they also had wisdom gained through struggle and compassion learned through suffering. The scattered fragments of Architect's civilization were reuniting to face their ancient enemy as one people. The energy beings from Andromeda would provide knowledge of dimensional manipulation. The machine intelligences would contribute their understanding of reality's underlying code. The humans of Earth would lead the effort with their unique combination of power and heart. Steve Johnson coordinated the defense of the galaxy as the first Devourer scout forces began to probe the weakening barriers. The new galactic fleet engaged. These advanced forces in battles that took place across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human and alien crews fought together with perfect coordination, their minds linked through Guardian technology that allowed them to act as one vast organism dedicated to protecting all life. The final battle between the new architects and the Devourers would determine the fate of not just the galaxy, but of all realities connected to it. Emma White led a strike team into the heart of the Devourer prison to plant devices that would destabilize their dimensional anchor points. Paula Jackson commanded forces that would prevent the enemy from escaping into normal space while the barriers were being modified. Alan Cooper worked to coordinate the efforts of 1 billion different species all fighting for the same cause. As the story reached its climax, the Guardian revealed its final secret. It had not just been watching over humanity during their exile. It had been preparing them for this exact moment. Every struggle they had faced, every lesson they had learned, every choice they had made, had been guided toward this ultimate test. The children of the architects were ready to surpass their ancestors and achieve what had seemed impossible. The Devourers were finally destroyed, not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding. The new architects had learned that their enemy fed on fear and division. By uniting all life in the galaxy in a common cause, and facing the threat with courage rather than terror, they were able to starve the Devourers of their source of power. The ancient enemies simply faded away, like shadows before the dawn. The galaxy emerged from the crisis transformed. Humanity had proven itself worthy of its inheritance, but had chosen to share that inheritance rather than hoard it. The new architects worked to awaken the potential that existed in all intelligent life, creating a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. The stars no longer dimmed in fear, but shone brighter with hope for a future, where all beings could reach their full potential together.